Okay. All right. If you guys see a giant bear standing on a shark with a Tommy gun, we know we're looking at the right thing.
That is a first, but yes, we see it.
Okay, fantastic, because that's the cue for my partner to take over.
Okay, so hi, I'm Ryan Sennett, and we're with Wind River. And today we'd like to quickly talk to you about how we've reimagined our senior class. And what we can say is that we have not eliminated senioritis, but we've found different ways to attempt to redirect it. And some of what we're going to show you is kind of what maybe you expect typical high schoolers to enjoy, but we found that the best way to redirect senioritis is to ask them what they really want to study, to hold up a mirror. And occasionally that is, in fact, I want to look at sharks, and I want to look at bears, and I want to look at Tommy guns. Can I do that? And we've had to find some different ways to approach, to give them a chance to go into classes that aren't just the typical English class their senior year, but if you go to the next one, to give them a real world experience, something experiential that's independent, that they can actually apply in ways that they make the connections more than just us prescribing what we think that they need to enjoy. But it's not easy. What we've discovered that even in relatively small cohorts, maybe 30 students, we have people interested in any number of things, from going into the FBI to art, theater, diesel mechanics. What you see on the screen right now is a sampling. In black is how they start the year, of what they think they want to go into, and then very importantly in the red, where they've changed after a lot of different study, research, interviews, all sorts of work going into it. They decided that it's not really how they wanted to approach, and when they graduate, they have a different perspective. So in order to do that,
And as Mr. Sennett pointed out, one of the challenges we had when we started reimagining this class was that we knew we wanted to involve every single senior. We're a relatively small high school, so we're looking at groups of between 20 to 30, which is small, but when you look at the spectrum of possibility and you think, my background is in English and drama, but we're looking at everything from horse farrier work to physical therapy to market and design, sports medicine. It becomes kind of a challenge to figure out how am I going to support these students and how am I going to make sure that this program can be supported from year to year, and it's not something that just kind of comes in and then is gone the next year. And so we knew that we were going to have to make certain, what we are calling kind of architectural considerations, where we thought about the actual space of learning. We removed our students out of the classroom. We renovated our high school library, turned it into kind of a student center, kind of has the feel more of like a high school commons, or I'm sorry, a college commons area, with access to different technological pieces, different rooms, different materials. We knew that we were going to have to change our pedagogy because, again, we weren't the experts in all of these different fields, and we knew that we were going to be gradually releasing our students, and we couldn't just cut ties with them because they're used to a typical high school setting. And so in order to prepare them for the type of autonomy they needed, we needed to make sure we scaffolded gradual release throughout the year versus just throwing them out there. And we knew our assessment really needed to be carefully constructed so that we were able to measure what students were learning throughout the year. And all of this really takes an organizational support that is very specific and also very supportive of not only the changes you're making as a class, but also the human capital it takes to produce this, which includes, you know, one person behind the scenes, or a couple, 3 of us, English teachers, developing internships and setting up network partnerships and working with students. I know that Hollywood likes to perpetuate the idea that one single teacher can change the world, but what we have found in the last 5 years is that lasting change has really required partnership and networking, both within our school and also outside of our school. We knew that when you look at this is actually what our students are going to speak to in a minute, which is the 4 phases of design, moving from the discovery of what we term a problem of practice, which is a contemporary problem in their research field, to their final defense of knowledge, which the senior group we have here will be doing these in about 2 weeks. They nodded, yes, 2 weeks. We were really going to have to think about how we used our partnership and our resources in order to support students through this process, not just for 1 year, but for multiple years. And this can be really kind of messy. I think of it like a root system under an oak tree. You know, you might see one oak tree, but they're all connected underneath the surface. And so developing this intentional design is also tied to facilitating these safe spaces to learn and to fail, especially throughout the internship process. Our students set up their own internships, their own interviews, their own network. They do work within our network partners that we've built over the last 5 years, but they're still expected to make those calls, to set those pieces up. And they'll speak a little bit to that, the challenges and the opportunity within that in a minute. And then also continuing to maintain our partnership and networking, which is really important. Over the years, we've had to work very hard in order to ensure that these partnerships are maintained. Wind River High School is pretty logistically isolated. We have a pretty large district, and for us to set up internships, it's not just as easy as maybe driving them to the next town, because that might be, you know, 30 minutes or so. And so you can see from the pictures above, we've had to get a little bit creative, whether that's bringing in the tribes when that's necessary to work with different topics, or situations that Marlon Spoonhunter in the top left, he helped us facilitate some of our internship work, or Voices in the Field. That's kind of the picture of the lady in the yellow shirt below. This was a really unique situation because we knew that a lot of our students hadn't actually met college professors, and so we worked with the University of Wyoming, and we brought out 30 different professors to our school, and we're able to have them conduct breakout sessions with our students looking at critical problems in their field. And even in the time of COVID, we were able to facilitate that this year through an online hybrid kind of environment. Wyotech has worked with us. That's one of our students above. You see her with me and also with Governor Gordon up in the top right corner talking about vocational tech. One of the things that you'll see with the student presentations is it's not just typical collegiate level work, but also we really try to support the VOTech field and making sure that we're putting students, kind of getting them into what Cindy Barlow from Wyotech would say, giving them armor to join the workforce, and not just throwing them out there and assuming that if you're not going to college, it's not enough. And then of course, University of Wyoming, our partnership with them, and the Game and Fish and other local agencies. So I looked at my watch, and it looks like we are about 5 or 6 minutes, and that's the cue for my students to turn it over to them. So with that, I will turn it over for them to describe the 4 phases of the internship through kind of their eyes and experience. Camjo, here you go.
So I'm Cameron Rader. I'm a Wind River senior, and I'm going to talk about the first phase. At the beginning of the year, we were given the opportunity to look at passion and practicality. For me, that was kind of difficult because I had a lot of things that I was very, very passionate about. I was passionate about drama, I was passionate about photography, cooking, and various other things that I had all throughout my life. But both my parents had been on the practical side. My mom was the realtor and appraiser, and my dad has worked for the state as a realtor and appraiser investigator for 10 plus years. And they had a lot more practical jobs. And I had to kind of take both of those into consideration when trying to find something to do my research on. A little while into this, I had a teacher, Mr. Walker, bring to my attention an electrical internship. And this really sparked something for me. In drama, I did a lot of stage building, a lot of work with lights and technical electrical stuff. And the fact that this job was practical and always in need really gave me both the passion and practicality that I was looking for into going to. And that's what I constructed my research questions around. So my first research question was, how do legal ramifications impact the electrical industry? This is really important because nowadays, legal ramifications are very important when it comes to safety in a company, for their employees and for their customers. To make sure the job is done 100% right and that nothing goes wrong is really, really a big deal. My second one is, how has the COVID pandemic affected the electrical industry? This is important because we're in the age of COVID, and this pandemic has really changed a lot of things, not just for us, but for a lot of industries and businesses. The electrical industry had to change. They couldn't do as much residential work as they used to. They had to kind of flip their gears and go into more of the commercial side of things. And the third one is, how does living in a rural community impact the electrical profession and how are they keeping relevant. This is important because it's not just running an electrical business. You also have to grow with your community. You have to grow in the community that you're in. So that way people know you, they know your name, they know that your company does its job correctly. And you're also keeping up with the code changes that happen every 3 years to make sure that you're following all the safety and regulations that you need to make sure that your customers and your employees are safe. This really helped me look further into going into the electrical industry. These 3 research questions opened my eyes to a lot of different ideas of what to do in the electrical industry, and I'm going to continue with it even after high school. I'm going to go to an electrical lineman school in Northwest Idaho, and I will turn it over to Maddie to talk about phase 2.
So I'm Madison Looper, and I'm going to talk about the second phase of our Capstone class, which is the research process. And throughout the research process, it was kind of a journey. We had to do a lot of things to collect our research. First is our secondary sources. This is pretty typical of high school classes. If you have an English class or any other class, you kind of given a topic and you can look online to find sources. But for this class, we didn't really have any direction. We were in charge of what we were going to be researching. So we got to decide what kind of sources, what issues, what topics that we wanted to look into. And then our next step was interviews. And for this one, we actually had to make contact with the people we wanted to work with. We had to email, call professionals in the fields and work out, arrange an interview and actually conduct the interview ourselves. And then lastly is internships. And this year, because of COVID, we kind of had to be a little bit more creative. We didn't, not all of us worked in an actual like in-person internship. Sometimes we had to do virtual ones and kind of make shift for that. To kind of show you the process of this research, I'm going to talk about one of my research questions, which is how can a career of a lawyer be complicated if you're a woman or a mother? And with my secondary sources, I was looking for specific issues that mothers and women face in this field. My first source talks about the invisible labor clause. This is pretty much how women and people of color have to work harder and longer to get the same authority, to get the same recognition as, say, a white male lawyer would. Another source of mine talked about the unequal division of household labor. This is pretty much saying that women spend a lot more time working in the home, which sometimes can interfere with their work. And the field of lawyers, their work is already so demanding. So if you have something going on at home, it can interfere with your work at home. And then I had an alternative perspective, and this kind of had a more positive outlook on being a mother in the work as a lawyer. And it talked about how women and parents in general have a better time working in the field because they have skills such as multitasking, getting things done quicker. And so that actually helped them in the field. And with my secondary sources, I kind of got these issues, and I know going forward into my interviews, I kind of had to know what I was looking for and know who I wanted to talk to. So I wanted to see how these issues had an effect on actual professionals in this field. So first I contacted Tia Hampton, who is a UW Law School graduate and also a former student of Wind River. And she talked to me about how she kind of had some issues being a woman in the field. She's heard things that she wasn't pretty enough, she wore too much makeup, not enough makeup, didn't look like a lawyer, all these things. And it kind of got in the way of her work sometimes because her clients, juries, they have to be able to trust their lawyers. And if they're concerned with how one looks rather than their ability, then that gets in the way of her job. I also talked to a male lawyer. This is Jesse Coolin. He's a DAA, and he talked about how he saw that there was issues that women faced in this field too. He talked about how billable hours are a really hard thing for some women to achieve, and billable hours are essential to moving up in the field and like being successful in their careers. And so that kind of got into the way for some women who had families or any other priorities in their life. And with our interviews, I got to make a really good network. I got to talk to these professionals, but also I get to have these people in my back pocket to talk to later on when I go into my work eventually in the future. And then lastly is internships, which I'm not going to talk a lot about my own because one of my other fellow students is going to talk about. But overall on the research process, it was kind of a journey. Once I learned some things, I kind of had to redirect what I was looking for. And throughout the whole capstone process, it was kind of, you got out of it what you put into it. So if I wanted to see these critical issues, I wanted to look at them, then I was in charge of finding those answers and solutions myself, not because I was assigned to, but because I wanted to. So now I'm going to turn it over to Stockman Stagner.
Hello, my name is Stockman Stagnan, and I'm also a senior at Wind River High School. And as Madison hinted on, phase 2 of kind of how you go through working with one research question, I'm here to talk about my personal experience and how to tie all 3 research questions into your internship layout and design, and how that moves you on to May and beyond and what you want to do after graduation. So I grew up on a ranch my whole life, and my parents have been ranchers for 30 plus years. And I've always had a very want and habit, hobby to be out the outdoors and fish and hunt and hike and go on horseback rides and pack out hunting and events and activities such as that. So I wanted to look into a career and kind of specify my efforts towards something outdoors and something that would be fun. So I decided to go into the wildlife biology industry, looking at to be a outfitter or a guide. And so I wanted to make some research questions that would help me not only get to that position, but also, like Madison hinted on before, gain my network and build my network as I got along. So I would always have people to back me up and help me along the way. So my first research question was, what opportunities should someone entering this field, such as myself coming out of high school, seek in order to gain a competitive edge? And this is important because a lot of youngsters like me want to just have a job that you go and guide out and have clients and or work your way to be an outfitter and kind of run your own business. Yet it's really hard to do so when you don't have any connections, you don't really know how to run an outfitting business or who to even start to talk to kind of form your advertising and things like that. So you want to gain a network early on, which Capstone helps a lot with, and so that you have people to help you along the way and gain kind of your advertisement and get your name out there. My second research question is, how are hunting and fishing regulations different throughout the state, as well as the entire United States, and what is significant about these changes? This came up to me because I've always hunted and fished on the Wind River Reservation as a descendant of my enrolled father as an Eastern Shoshone. And this is big because not a lot of people understand the difference between reservation and stateside, because there's not too many reservations in the United States anymore. And mainly stateside is what people are familiar with. So I was wanting to look into more how hunting regulations are different with outfitters, such as how they work with preference points on the state side and no preference points on the reservation side, and how they draw differently along with, because the same person on the reservation, if they were just lucky, could draw 4 ram tags in a year in a row, while on the state side that will probably never happen. So I thought that was very interesting, and that interested me. My third research question was, how has the field of hunting and fishing changed over the past few decades, and where is it going in the future? I thought this was important because I've seen a lot of my friends and a lot of my close hunting buddies start to use technology in order to gain more of that competitive edge and more of a successful chance in order to get a harvest that year, such as game cameras and hunting apps as Onyx and Moonlight. And I thought this was important because I'm a big advocate on bow hunting, and bow hunting is all about fair chase and how you give the animal just as much as chance to live as you have to take its life. So I really wanted to look into that and make sure that technology wasn't just going to take over and completely degrade the amount of fair chase within that. So these research questions helped me lay out my internship design And like Madison hinted on, with COVID restrictions, it's really hard to go out in the field now and get out and do what you want to do hands-on. So as you can see, my day 1 and day 3 internships were public game and fish meetings. My day 1 was regarding a collision mitigation meeting, and it was about up in DuBois, Wyoming, which is where I live. It hit home to me because I live real close to DuBois. I live in Crowheart, Wyoming, and it was regarding how the collisions between vehicles and mule deer were increasing very heavily, and it was not benefiting mule deer because they were getting hit so much that the population was dwindling, and it was affecting the guiding and outfitting industries up there because as the mule deer herds were dwindling, the clients that they would be able to have a successful harvest were dwindling, and it was kind of just a chain reaction from car collisions to not be able to hunt as many animals to not be able to bring as much money into your business because you don't have as many clients. My day 3 public game and fish meeting was regarding a migration assessment, and this kind of looked over the same thing over a larger scale over the whole state regarding mule deer and elk populations in specific, and how they were migrating over big roads such as one being I-80, and the collision rates were being so high that guides were having to decrease the clients that they were taking in per year to go get an elk or go get a mule deer because of collisions. And also they were just taking that hit in their business, so they wanted to kind of minimize the collisions rate, so they started to work with the game and fish and the outfitters, knowing how they migrated, and they started building underpasses and overpasses to these big roads so these mule deer and elk could successfully migrate so that they would be ready for fall harvest. My day 2 internship design was I was able to go down to Casper College and do a sit-in on an agricultural class lab. And this was very interesting to me because I've never really done anything quite like this. We got to look at different kind of plants and how they grew in different seasons and how durable they were to the cold. And we talked about what animals were foragers and what animals were grass eaters. And it was important because foragers migrated a little bit faster than grass eaters, and grass eaters waited obviously for the grass to come in thick. And I thought that could connect pretty good to my interest, because as a guide, you want to know where your animals are at what time of season. And if you're hunting a forager, they're going to be in there a little bit earlier than a grass eater. And I just thought that was interesting because you always want to know right where your herd is and how to get to them. And overall, looking on my internship design, I want to kind of group this together and graduate in May and go. And I have a cousin that is a guide currently. He works up in the DuBois area and then Billings, Montana, and I wanted to kind of apprenticeship for him, or go to CWC, go to UW, and kind of just work around that so that I could get experience and get an education at the same time. And then I just wanted to take this as a certain career so that I could become what I've always wanted to do and be out in the outdoors and do what I want to do. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Patrick Jacobson, another senior.
Hello, everyone. I'm Patrick Jacobson, and I am a senior at Wind River High School in the senior capstone class. So at the beginning of the year, I was able to look at culinary entrepreneurship. So that's owning and running a restaurant. I wanted to own a business. And some of my questions that I had about that were about COVID and how that was affecting the industry, which obviously it really put it at risk. But it seems to be coming back now when restrictions are being lifted everywhere, and like they're becoming more lax and everything. And I wanted to look into how the restaurant industry would change within the next 5 to 10 years. So that's with technological advancements, maybe things are going to change with like AI, how they might be able to take over the restaurant industry. And I also wanted to look at the competitive side of it. So that's being able to stay relevant and compete in today's restaurant market. So as I was looking through these sources that were, my research questions were guiding me to these sources that were telling me that the restaurant industry may become obsolete within the next 5 to 10 years, 15 years, and the classic dining experience is going to die out with the rise of these things called ghost restaurants, where they don't actually have a physical storefront where you can dine in, but instead it's through delivery apps. And that just sort of made me lose passion for making a career out of that. So at the second semester, I was looking into photography, and I still wanted to look at how COVID was affecting that industry and the risks that are involved with that. But I also wanted to look at how I could balance monetization and happiness with my passion, where taking pictures that I want to take are pitted up against pictures that might be able to make some more money. And I also wanted to look at the responsibilities of being a photographer, especially morally, where some pictures may not be meant to be taken. And even now, I am still wary on being a photographer, where I've seen these sources that are saying that with smartphones and digital cameras and everything, anyone can take these pictures, and there's not a whole lot that one can do to stand out in the world of photography. And again, that sort of killed my passion for making it into a career. So I'm still not 100% sure what I really want to do with my life. So that has sort of affected how my internship design is going to look. So I was looking at photography, so I wanted to create a social media account and post to it on my own time and possibly receive critical feedback from that and essentially see what it's like to gain a following and put myself out there. And I also got some critical feedback from our yearbook teacher, Mr. Sennett, who's also a photographer, and he taught me a lot about how lines can make a picture more appealing. But I also looked into English and teaching with our English department, who is here right now, Mrs. Garcia Clapp, Mrs. Millward, and Mr. Sennett, because I was also passionate about English and possibly even teaching. And even then, I'm still not 100% sure on what I want to do. So my plan for May and beyond is essentially figuring out exactly what I want to do with my life. And of course, there's still time, but I'm going to Montana State University in the fall so that I can look more into what I actually want to do with my life. And I'm looking into theater, English, management, online content creation, a bunch of things like that, because there's just a lot of stuff that I like to do, and I want to explore making my passion into a career. And with that, I think I'm going to hand it back to Ms. Garcia Clapp.
Thank you for listening. We tried to give ourselves 5 minutes for question and answer, but we tend to like to fill a whole space, I suppose. But as Patrick pointed out, I would mention, you can see the seniors gathering behind me. One of the most important parts of the class and our design is that we wanted to make sure that there was a flexibility that students were allowed to not only study what they wanted, but also along the way between that discovery of a problem to the defense of knowledge, have the flexibility to move with their research interests as they kind of evolved. And that was kind of a key feature of the class. And so we will turn it over to them. If you have questions, if we've spoke too long and we have them all, we can answer them later, but they are here and prepared and dressed up from the top up if you'd like to talk to them.
We're actually great on time.
Oh, okay.
A chance for some questions, and I'll look to fellow board members to get the conversation started. Yeah.
Thank you, students, for presenting your information. I really appreciate that. What percentage of students at the high school or in the senior class are engaged in this course?
So senior capstone is a graduation requirement, so 100% of students graduating from Wind River undergo the capstone class, unless they
100%.
Yes. Yep.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I appreciate the variability in their interests, and It just seems exactly how life is, that things really change. I have to say, I'm extremely impressed with not only the questions and the research base behind them, but the idea that when you give students an opportunity to focus on their interest and their passion, how that becomes meaningful work, and meaningful work ends up creating motivation. And while I know it probably is a little scary to think those deadlines are coming up, I think the motivation is behind them to finish the product. How long have you had this program in place?
This will be our 5th year.
Your 5th year.
Yes.
And in that time period, have you done any kind of program evaluation as you think about all the graduates and all the students that have been through it? My interest would be, is the evaluation formal, and what are some examples of things you've changed that are no longer in place from year one?
One thing I can say about kind of an informal evaluation, but the change of heart at the end of the year, where some students that were dead set, seemingly since birth, to go into a certain field. Like, I've always known I wanted to go into music education. I want to be a teacher. When they start working with kids and they come away right before graduation, knowing that maybe they want music in their life, but they don't like educating at all, that is about one of the better evaluations that we can have, where they make that big choice sooner, rather than going into college as a freshman, kind of scared, kind of confused, spending a lot of money only to maybe 3 or 4 years later make that same choice. So I know that's not a formal evaluation, but it's an important one that occurs early on.
I think maybe formally, we spoke a little bit last week with the University of Wyoming about this. We're kind of at that critical point where we've had 5 cohorts go through. We have a group now where we're kind of visiting a little bit with the University of Wyoming about what it might look like to set up a more formal process to kind of start looking at the narratives of students of the past. We've kind of done that informally through students who contact us and let us know. We actually just recently received a letter from a former student who's becoming, of all things, an insurance agent. The strangest project to study through her senior year. And we talked a little bit with the University of Wyoming about how we might develop a surveying tool or something that we can start to kind of formally gather those stories together and look at what does it really look like when students go through this. Since the first cohort is now 4 years out, 5 years out, generally a lot of them are now entering different programs outside of undergrad. And so I'd say we're right at that key point where we're starting to figure out what might a formal program evaluation look like if we were to gather some survey data. We definitely have to probably work with an outside organization like the university to be able to make sure that that was conducted with the right due diligence, but it's definitely been on our minds and on the partnerships.
I think it's a wonderful opportunity. And if I understand your comment correctly, it sounds like you consider yourself 100% successful if 100% of the students don't go into what they thought they were going to do, which I think is, I think that's admirable, because I think it allows people to expand their interests and expand their horizons. Thank you for the great work. I'm extremely impressed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that was just wonderful. Thank you so much for the presentation. And I just am curious, as we as a Board of Education and education leaders really contemplate this concept of a profile of a graduate, which includes more than assessment scores and grades and just mastery of content in a classroom, we think about behaviors and habits and expectations that we want our students leaving high school with. So I was wondering if either from your perspective or from some of the students' perspectives, what are some of the behaviors or habits that you think you've learned through this Capstone project that you may not have learned in a traditional sort of classroom setting?
We're gonna let the students take the hot seat on that one.
Okay, so yeah. Okay. My name is Trinity Martinez, and To answer your question for me personally, I think one of the very important things that we've learned from this class is kind of how to be professional and how to do some things that we never would have known otherwise. These include like sending professional emails, or kind of how to build a network, or just how to get a job. I think one thing that was very helpful for us in Capstone was when we set up our internships and building that network. It was very helpful for some of the kids in our class to understand kind of the job process and how you have to go through that in order to get a job, or just know people in the field and kind of understand what you're getting yourself into. So I think for me, that would be it.
I'm Patrick Jacobson, and you saw me present before. A big part of the class actually is avoiding this thing that we call senioritis. And that's just one of the behaviors that is built up unconsciously through high school. And it really only manifests itself as a senior because you're almost done with school and you sort of get this mindset that we're almost done. I don't really want to try anymore. And that was a big thing, especially at the beginning of the year, that we looked into, is how to basically avoid that and overcome that apathy that we begin feeling as seniors. Yeah, senioritis is a behavior that we learn to more overcome than practice, I guess.
I'm Maddie Looper. I presented earlier, but I think one of the biggest things that Capstone helps us with is transitioning from high school into the real world. For me personally, I'm still going into the field that I started the class with, and for me, I feel a lot more comfortable with issues and challenges that I might face. I also feel a lot more comfortable going into a college setting, and I think that with the help of the teachers and the help of the research that we've gone through, that we actually get to have an understanding from more of an inside perspective rather than just kind of going in with no expectations. I think it really sets us up for success and for kind of expectations of what we will have to overcome in the real world or in our careers.
Maybe just from a teaching end, there's some interesting growth situations, I guess, that we could say occur, because one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, is this class really takes some kind of human capital in terms of building your network and working within those and maintaining those partnership groups. And I guess one of the things that we've kind of learned as educators is the importance of working with kind of our state groups, whether that's, local agencies, working with the Riverton PD, the Lander PD, the Game and Fish, and really kind of figuring out that a lot of these agencies have stakes in education and how we can kind of work together to get our groups going. That's been a really key part, especially with our VOTEC people, bringing them on board and having them understand that we are very passionate about not only getting students into college, but also getting them into vocational fields competitively. And that's been a really big growing opportunity, I guess, from where I started in my educational career 13 years ago, where maybe it felt like the push was always college, always one route, and really being open to supporting their passions has been kind of a growth opportunity for me.
I briefly said at the beginning that the class is really kind of like holding up a mirror and asking them, all right, you don't want to study this, so what do you want to do? You say that you have other things that you could be doing, better ways to use your time. Let's take that serious and really reflect on that. And it takes a good chunk of time for a lot of the kids. I'd say almost half the year is making some errors along the way. That when Patrick brings up senioritis, that manifests itself in some pretty strange ways, but it's much better to kind of go through that process here a little bit now and make some of those mistakes when you still have a strong support network, and help them coach them, help them coach themselves through some of these errors before they're just sent off or they're rushing to go somewhere, even if they don't know why. So it's a great opportunity to kind of build some of that capability, capacity.
Thank you so much for sharing both as educators and how you've designed a way to get seniors excited in that tough final year sometimes, and to get